One of the coolest things about woodworking is designing a project in SketchUp and then watching it come to life on your workbench. Today we're going to be making a new K5 jig cabinet. If you remember in my last video, my old cabinet exploded after I accidentally dropped it. So I designed and built a new one. This one is new and improved. First off, the cabinet utilizes T-tracks as a clamping method. The T-bolt slots are spaced specifically for the T-tracks in my workbench. Next, there is a hole on the front of it so you can store it vertically. It also has more storage drawers for all your Kreg accessories and random things. It's 15 degrees in Alabama right now, so I'm not going to put finish on the cabinet until it warms up. I will probably use shellac. But if you want to see how I'll build the cabinet, take your jacket off, stay a while, and cheers. I'm glad you're here. Actually, put your jacket back on, it's cold. The first step is to cut out the base to final length with a track saw. I'm using a 3/4 inch scrap piece of oak plywood, but the plans actually call for 1/2 inch, but I didn't have any 1/2 inch plywood on hand. I need to get rid of this plywood anyway. Next, take the base over to the table saw and rip it to final width. Mark out the points of the diagonal cuts, then mark the lines with a straight edge. All of these measurements will be included in the plans, which will be in the description below. I will then use a track saw to cut out each diagonal piece. Make sure you have a solid base when you are making these cuts, or the base will tip with the weight of the saw. I'm using Rockler bench cookies, but did not do a good job of moving them around in the best positions. I would recommend using a piece of rigid foam to support the base. Mark out the 2 pilot holes for the handles. I found it easier to use a straight edge ruler and put the bottom point of the diagonal at the 1 inch line and then marking your holes, but adding an inch to what's listed in the plans. Then use a combo square to mark out the lines from the edge of the base, and then take a square to mark the perpendicular lines. This will give you a crosshair to center your drill bit on. Then we're going to use the same process for the T-bolt slots. I used a hole punch off camera and marked each center of the crosshairs. Then I'm going to drill out each T-bolt slots with a 5/16 inch pilot hole bit. And with the magic of editing trickeration, I use a 1 inch Forstner bit to drill out the holes, but you will never know that I forgot to record the whole process. Next, I'm going to use a straight edge and draw a line connecting the 2 holes in the handles. Then Satan's power tool is used to cut the lines out. I mean the jigsaw. No, the wiggly lines are not a mistake. They are a feature so the handles conform to your fingers. Yeah, that's it. After you throw the jigsaw across the shop, use a tool that is actually a gift from heaven, the Milwaukee Compact Router, to add a 1/8 inch roundover to the base. Please note that I am stopping the bit right at the top point of the back angle where the base of the jig will sit. And then add the 1/8 inch roundover to the handles and the hole for the wall mount. Also, you're going to do the exact same thing on both sides of the base. And then go retrieve your jigsaw from the other side of the shop, and we're going to cut out the lines for the T-bolt slots. The slots are too small for a roundover unless you want to get squirrely with a wood file, but that's not really necessary. Now I'm going to stop and test the T-slot spacings. Note that my T-tracks are spaced 25 inches on center. Space your slots accordingly to your T-track setup, or this won't probably work very well if yours is different from mine. And if you do not have T-tracks, don't worry, there is plenty of space around the base to use clamps. As you guys know that I don't do math very well, so I'm actually going to use the K5 jig to give me the exact reference lines for the width and length of the jig. Place the K5 between your table saw blade and the fence, and then move the fence where the tooth is barely touching the bottom of the K5. Then rip 2 pieces of stock to that exact width. Then I butt out the K5 and the support pieces to the fence and marked out the front to reference the length of the both pieces. I thought this was pretty clever myself. Then take the bases over to the miter saw and Snoop Dogg gang cut them. To install the base, apply glue to the bottom of each support and then use a square to line them up with the back of the base. Then use a crown stapler to tack them in place. And make sure you do not use a 641 woodpecker square to do this because the base is now not flush with the back. There's a little notch on the square that will make it protrude out a little bit. So just make sure your support piece is flush with the base. And the top base shifted slightly. Well, that's just awesome. Before tacking in the top base piece into place, press and hold down on it for a few seconds while the glue sets. Next, flush up the K5 to the sides of the base using a square, and then lock it down with 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. And that is not going to go anywhere, so let's move on to making the parts for the cabinets and the drawers. Cabinet making part montage. I'm going to assemble the cabinets with glue and staples. It's just shop furniture, so I'm not really concerned about the staples showing. I could have used pocket holes, but the spaces are tight, so it would be really difficult to get a drill into them, and I didn't really want the pocket holes showing on the outside. I'm using these PowerTech T-Track stops to keep the cabinet parts square as I tack them together, and I'm using a spacer to place the middle divider in the right spot. Next, we're going to use a lot of glue on the bottom of the cabinets, and then we're going to flip it over and flush it up with the front of the base of the jig. Then toenail a staple into the side cabinet wall. This is going to lock the cabinet in place, and then drop staples into the cabinet from the bottom. So I forgot to move the camera around while I was driving the staples into the bottom, so this is a good time to say, hey, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button, and I would really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and put a 1/8 inch roundover on all the top supports of the cabinet, and I'm also going to sand it up to 220 grit. Drawer part montage. So if you watched my past videos, you've seen the way I space drawer fronts and backs. Well, for the drawer backs, they are really small, so I can't cut them on the miter saw. So I did the same process with the miter gauge and the table saw. First thing I did was reference the distance between the stop block and the blade with the bottom of the drawer. Then I butted up the two drawer sides against the stop block, clamped them down, then made the cut. This gives me perfectly sized drawer backs. Now here is the way the drawers come together. First, I butt up the one side to the T-Track stop that is set at a right angle. Then apply glue. Use the second side to prop up the bottom, and then pin nail the bottom to the side. Make sure the sides are flush for the front and back. Then repeat the process for the other side. Then the back is put in place and pin nailed. Then attach the front. The front is not going to be flush for the sides as it has a slight reveal. Just center it as best as you can and then pin nail it with some glue. And for the last step, I'm going to find the center of the drawer fronts and then pre-drill and then install the handles. And don't forget that the plans will be posted on my website and there will be a link below. There will also be a link to all the tools and materials that I've used in the video. Also, if you can do me a solid and pound that like button. And if you think I deserved it, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get future upcoming project notifications. And thank you guys for hanging out with me today, and I hope you have a good one. Cheers.